Hello, women's football fans. Congratulations. If you're watching this, you've made it through another day. Happy to be here. This is episode 2 of the Women's Soccer/Football podcast. My name is Bryce, and welcome to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube, or welcome to the Spotify/Anchor channel if you're listening on audio. This episode's main topic is going to be all about the United States Women's National Team's January Camp Roster. Not exclusively about it. We'll get into a ton of other topics as well, but welcome. Here we are. We have made it. Let's set the scene a little bit. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can clearly see my surroundings and my picture of coffee in the background. It's fantastic. I am wearing a United States Women's National Team jersey. It is Tobin Heath's, the white one, and it's got 3 stars on it rather than 4. I got this on sale, I believe, during the 2019 World Cup. Phenomenal deal. I absolutely love it. I have in front of me a mug that says, "Coffee is a hug in a mug," and it is filled with a combination of coffee and a hot cocoa packet. For those of you who have never tried that combination, I highly recommend it. It is a great drink if you're in the Midwest like me and you're freezing because it's like 20 degrees out, it's snowing, it's icy out. There's nothing better than a comfortable warm cup of cocoa in the winter like this, so highly recommend it. And shout out to my dad for this Christmas gift. And it was a dollar store find, I believe. So, wow, this is one heck of a find. Thanks, Dad. We've got a lot going on this week. A lot of women's national team news has come out, obviously, with the roster being released. And WSL news and other news from around the world has been going down. So, we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about today. One thing before we get started that I want to mention, I wanted to say thank you to all of the listeners and all of the people who supported the first episode of the podcast, which I called Pilot. I greatly appreciate you guys so much. It was a ton of fun to make, and I appreciate you guys all participating in the fandom and having fun and talking to me. I greatly appreciate it more than anything in the world. It's a ton of fun, and I appreciate all your support. The other thing I wanted to mention too, if you guys are looking for daily WOSO content or women's football content, I want to, sorry, blanked out for a second. I want to inform you guys about my various other platforms that I also do work on as well. I am on TikTok, I am on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm even on LinkedIn, I'm also on Twitter. We've got a written blog as well. All of this is going to be linked down in the description below for this video, and it's also on my YouTube channel. There's quick links that you can click. I believe I even have a Twitch channel, which I haven't used in a really long time. That's back in the days when I tried streaming for the first time. It's going back like 2 years because I didn't really like streaming on Twitch. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. If you guys are looking for nonstop women's football content, that's your place to go. Of course, I try to make as many YouTube videos and podcasts as I can, but as of right now, it's only once a week. That'll change as time goes on. But if you're looking for something more consistent, I highly recommend checking out those platforms as well. All right, so we've got a lot to talk about. Let's get right into it. We've got some good segments going on, and we've also got some good main topics. So let's kick it off with the first segment of the day, which is going to be the featured WOSO content of the week. And for this week, it's going to be the Equalizer. So for those of you who don't know what the Equalizer is, the Equalizer is run by a full-time women's football journalist named Jeff Kassouf. He started this up, I believe, a year ago or so. And they have their own website where they publish articles pretty consistently. He's got a full team of journalists working with him. I believe it's a paid subscription service, but you don't have to pay if you don't want to. You can just read a little snippets of the article. Or they also have a podcast on Anchor and Spotify. I listen to it pretty much every chance I get. They usually release an episode every Monday morning-ish. It's a little bit flexible with the holidays and the schedule, and they've got things going on. I'm sure they're taking time off, too, because a lot's been going on. But in addition to that, Jeff Kassouf has a little side podcast called Kickin' Back, where he interviews some of the greatest minds of women's football, past and present. He's interviewed the likes of Lisa Baird, the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League here in the United States. That was really enlightening to listen to and hear her perspective on where the league is going and her plan. He's also interviewed U.S. Women's National Team retirees such as Mia Hamm and Julie Foudy. That was one of the most entertaining interviews I've listened to. It's a ton of fun. And also former players such as Heather O'Reilly, he interviewed a few weeks back. It's just really interesting to hear her perspective as she goes from national team great and as she transitions to another stage in her life to having children. things along those lines. So if you're looking for a different perspective on women's football, The Equalizer is a good place to get started. So now with the first segment down and out of the way, let's get into segment number 2. And segment number 2 is going to feature the Women's Footballer of the Week. Now, this one is a hidden gem that I actually found on LinkedIn. I was kind of perusing the different NWSL teams on LinkedIn because obviously that's the main content that I follow and that I post about. I ran across Sky Blue's LinkedIn page, and it featured an article about our Women's Football of the Week, which is Paige Monahan. Paige Monahan is our Women's Footballer of the Week because she hosted a charity auction for Roxbury Social Services, which is in New Jersey. And what she did was she raised $2,500 for them. That's $2,500. And good on her. That's amazing. That I love to see when players are able to give back to the communities that they occupy and are able to help the people that they live with. And it's just all around fantastic. We always love it. So Paige Monahan, good on you. Way to go. Keep up the great work. All right, so now we're getting into the third and final segment before we get into our main topics of the evening. And we've got a lot of them to cover because, like I said, a ton has happened this week. So let's get into it. This main segment, or I'm sorry, not this main segment, segment number 3, which is the week in review. This is a new segment I like to do just to kind of keep everybody updated and aggregate everything in the entire week in case you've been busy and haven't had a chance to keep up. This is a great way to just sum everything up. So, the week in review. Ciara King was traded from FC Kansas City to OL Reign. In the trade, OL Reign received Ciara King and a 2021 fourth-round pick, I believe. And in exchange, FC Kansas City received Darian Jenkins, the signing rights to Meg Brandt, and also another draft pick, I believe that's coming in 2022. Might have the draft picks mixed up, but I'm trying to maintain it all in my head, so just bear with me a little bit. Feel free to fact check that. All right, so we've also seen this week an uptick in COVID cases for multiple players around the world. Unfortunately, Alex Morgan, as some of you might know, was one of them. I believe she announced via Twitter on Tuesday, which is January 5th, that her and her family contracted coronavirus over the holidays, which is unfortunate. We wish them all a healthy recovery. WSL players, I believe, have been diagnosed with COVID as well. Can't remember off the top of my head who all of them are, and I believe some players with Manchester City have been too. Like I said, please fact check that on because there's just a lot going on. But because of that, the Arsenal game has been postponed for the WSL this weekend, and so is the Manchester City game. Early this morning, that was not the case, so I believe they just decided that today. For those of you who are listening and watching, I'm filming this on January 7th. So that's just an update and development that's going on. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. The beginning of the transfer window, since it's past January 1st, the beginning of the transfer window has begun. I hope all of you get to keep the players that you absolutely love on your teams. A couple signings have been made. Shalina Zadorsky and Alana Kennedy have been signed on permanent deals with Tottenham Hotspur of the WSL, so that's really exciting. I think Tottenham have added 2 permanent pieces that they really, really need. Given that they're still climbing up in the table, having that solid defensive base can really help them. So I think they made 2 great decisions there. But we'll see how the January transfer window develops. I don't anticipate a ton of shock moves coming. I haven't heard anybody link, so we'll see. The NWSL Draft is taking place on Wednesday, January 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern. For those of you who are curious and want to watch it, you can stream it on Twitch at NWSL's on NWSL's site, I guess, or I guess you could say account. So I'll be watching it. I'm excited to see where Katarina Macario goes. I am pretty positive she'll be the number 1 pick. If you want my guess, I'm going to guess she's going to go to Racing Louisville number 1. Whether or not she'll want to play there, whether or not they'll keep her, that's a different story. I'm not sure. Nobody's really asked her, I believe, with all the January camp announcements. So we'll see how that goes. Keep your eyes peeled. And last but not least, of course, the United States Women's National Team January Camp Roster is now out. It was released on Wednesday, January 6th, I believe, in the morning. I'm sure Vlatko had a long night the night before trying to figure out who he wanted to take to camp. But they are going to be playing 2 friendlies. It's going to be kind of a pseudo doubleheader against Colombia. The first match is going to be January 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern on FS1. The second match is going to be January 22nd, so about 4 or 5 days later, also at 7 p.m. Eastern, but on ESPN2. So if you guys are dying to see some U.S. Women's National Team action, that will be a perfect time for it. A few weeks out. I'm counting down the days. I know that for sure. It's less than 2 weeks away, so keep your eyes peeled, and we'll definitely have more content out for that. All right, so with all the main segments down out of the way, everybody, let's get right into the main topics that we've got coming out. We've got quite a few good ones this evening. I don't want to keep you guys waiting any longer. It's already been 10 minutes, so let's dive right in. So, this main topic is going to be all about the January camp roster. Now, like I said, the roster was released a couple days ago. Vlatko obviously had some very tough decisions to make. Before I get into my thoughts on the roster, there's a couple considerations that we have to take into account. So, a couple days before they were able to announce the roster, Alex Morgan was diagnosed with COVID, so she's obviously out of the roster for January. That eliminates another forward. And that's no surprise. But one other thing that I noticed, and I'm sure a lot of you noticed, is that Tobin Heath and Kristen Press were also not in the roster. The reason being for that is I believe they just wanted to avoid travel and just kind of stay in England to avoid potentially contracting coronavirus because, like I kind of mentioned earlier, there's been an uptick in COVID cases around the world, so I don't blame them for wanting to stay in England and avoid international duty. Well within the right, and like I said, I don't blame them at all. Stay safe, stay healthy. So that's the reason why you won't see either one of them on this roster. I believe that Tobin and Kristen, I don't know if Kristen's going to be playing in the upcoming WSL games. I believe Tobin is intending to. Like I said, feel free to look around and fact check on that as well. But I just wanted to throw out those points before we get deep into the roster. Now, let's get into who's actually on the roster. So we'll go kind of back to front. We'll go from goalkeepers to forwards. So for the goalkeepers, Vlatko decided to take these four keepers. So Alyssa Nair, Ashlyn Harris, Aubrey Bledsoe, and Jane Campbell. So the four of them. He took 10 defenders, the likes of which include Emily Sonnet, Becky Sauerbrunn, Midge Purse, Kelly O'Hara, Ellie Krieger, Emily Fox, Crystal Dunn, Abby Dahlkemper, Tina Davidson, and Alana Cook. Moving on to the midfielders now. The midfielders he picked up were Julie Ertz, Lindsay Horan, Jaylene Howell, Rose Lavelle, Andy Sullivan, Sam Mewis, Christy Mewis, Mewtwo, that's exciting, and Katerina Macario. So now we get into the last part of the roster, which is the forwards. The forwards he picked up were Carly Lloyd, Mallory Pugh, Megan Rapino, Sophia Smith, and Lynn Williams. So if I had to sum this roster up in one word, surprises. To me, there were quite a few surprises on this list that I didn't know what to expect or not. That's not to say that I think Vlatko did a poor job. I actually think Vlatko did an amazing job picking this January camp roster, especially since it's a pretty big deal. It's the one before the She Believes Cup that's going to be coming up here in February, so he's going to want to see people clicking on all cylinders, and he's going to want to start preparing for the Summer Olympics, which of course is going to be coming up here in July. So it was really, really interesting. That's just my general thought that he picked a good roster. So let's kind of go through each of these sections and let's talk about some of the surprises that I'm referring to. Now, there weren't surprises all over this roster, if I'm being honest. In fact, there are some positions and players that were picked that I think they're pretty predictable. The goalkeepers I'm the least surprised of in that group. Alyssa Nair, Ashlyn Harris, Aubrey Bledsoe, Jane Campbell. I don't think anybody else was even in the conversation, to be completely honest, to be in that group. I think those are the foremost elite keepers that the United States has, and it's no surprise they picked them. Plus, he's picked in some fashion all four of them in like the last 3 or 4 camps, so not a ton of surprises there. And I think he did a good job in picking that particular group. It's got a few more goalkeeper, like maybe one more goalkeeper in there that I thought, but what I'm thinking is he wants to see probably Aubrey Bledsoe and Jane Campbell duke it out. Maybe he's trying to figure out who's going to be the second keeper to back up Alyssa Nair. I still think it's Ashlyn Harris because of the amount of goalkeeping experience that she has, and I still think that she's more talented than Aubrey and Jane. Might be a bit of a hot take for some, but for me, I think Ashlyn is still the bona fide backup in the squad. So the next least surprising group for me, moving on a little bit into the next topic here. The midfielders is the next least surprising group that I found in this particular roster. The inclusion of Andy Sullivan is a little interesting. Like I said, not too surprising because she's been a solid midfielder for a while now, and I believe she still has a ton of potential to bring to the squad. But you've got Julie Ertz, Lindsay Horan, Rose Lavelle, Sam Mewis. That rotating four that's kind of been a staple in their squad since the 2019 World Cup and earlier. No surprise they want to include all four of them, and they've proven time and time again that they're just studs. The one thing that I'm surprised is that I thought Rose was still injured, but apparently not if she's in the January camp. Kind of feeds my conspiracy theory that a lot of U.S. women's national team players are injured for club play, but are never injured for international play. I'll talk about that someday. That's one of my many conspiracy theories, but nonetheless, I'm a little surprised that Jaylene Howell ended up making this roster. I don't know if he is still looking to maybe fill up a fifth midfield spot, and that's why he took 8 midfielders. Overall, it's hard to say because for me, Katarina Macario would logically be that fifth midfielder. In my opinion, it seems as though Vlatko is really high on Katarina Macario because of the fact that he's talked in the press a couple of times about getting her eligible so that she has the chance to play in the Summer Olympics. They've gotten her citizenship. They got that back in October. They recently said after they submitted the roster that they're really close to getting her eligible from FIFA. I believe they're in the closing stages of that. I believe what they had to do is they had to get a waiver from FIFA or submit a waiver to FIFA that would grant her eligibility. I'll actually talk about that in a main topic later in the logistics of that because it gets a little confusing. FIFA laws are weird. But overall, those are my general thoughts for the midfielders. Not a ton of surprises, some irregular not irregularities, some interesting picks, but overall, that's what we got. Now let's move on to the defenders. So Vlatko picked up 10 defenders, which to me is really, really strange. The reason it's strange is because it tells me that I think he's undecided on who else he wants to take into the Olympics. That's why he's got such a big sample size, right? He wants to see, okay, I'm going to expand my reach a little bit. I'm going to get a bigger sample size because I think I've got a solid pool to put together and pick out who's going to be the best player going into this summer. Now, of course, there's going to be defenders in this list that are tried, true, proven, and always perform at a high level. I'm talking Becky Sarburn, Abby Dahlkemper, Crystal and Kelly O'Hara. I think as long as those four stay healthy, they're shoe-ins for the Summer Olympics without a doubt. But the others, Alana Cook was a surprise for me being included. She's played really well at PSG this year, but she flew under my radar, so there's that. Tierna Davidson, Emily Fox, Ellie Krieger, Midge Person, Emily Sonnet. The remaining six, I think he'll take two. I think he'll take 6 defenders total to the Summer Olympics with him. And I believe in that remaining group of 6, he's trying to vie out which 2 he's gonna pick. I have my opinions on who he's gonna pick. I think he's gonna end up taking, provided that they play well, Ellie Krieger and Tierna Davidson. But with how many extra defenders he's picked up in this camp, it tells me he's not quite sure. He wants to get a second look at a lot of these other players. Emily Fox included, which I thought was really interesting. I believe she recently graduated or is graduating from UNC. I don't really know a ton about Emily Fox, to be honest. I know a lot of other people in the fandom do, so feel free to enlighten me in the comments below if you have more information on her. I couldn't find a ton on her other than that she played at UNC, so there's that. But I think it's interesting because that 6th defender, I have a feeling that Midge Purse could make a case and possibly be picked over Tierna Davidson or maybe even Ellie Krieger. Who knows? But I think that this is going to be the most interesting battle in the entire roster as to what that 6th defender is going to be, or that 5th and 6th defender is going to be. If Midge Purse plays well and proves that she can be versatile enough to not play on the wing but play in defense, I think there's a chance because much like Crystal Dunn has kind of made that transition, maybe Vlatko sees that opportunity in Midge Purse. That's a lot of upside, and she's really versatile, so who knows? Tierna Davidson, I think, is a very solid player, so I think she makes a little bit more of a case than Midge Purse can, but I think if Midge Purse plays really, really well, she's got a shot. I think it's a safe bet to say Ellie Krieger is going to make that Olympic roster because I still think she's got a ton of talent behind her. I think that she is one of the most experienced players in the squad aside from Megan Rapino, Carly Lloyd, Ashlyn Harris. And I know experience isn't everything when you're looking at a roster, but the reality of it is that you got to make the most of your chances, you got to make the most of your opportunities in these big tournaments. And when you want somebody who's seen these big moments before and knows how to cope with them, Ali Krieger can do that. Plus, like I said, she's still one of the most talented defenders in the world. So I would feel much more comfortable having her in the squad backing up a Crystal Dunn or a Kelly O'Hara should either one of them get injured. More so than the other players, I think he can afford to bring in one young player to sort of supplement the squad because how likely is it that one of the four defenders that you have is going to get injured? But we'll see. Time will tell. All right. So let's get into this last little tidbit of the roster, and that's the forwards. I think things got really spicy when Alex Morgan, that is, got COVID-19 and announced it earlier in this week because I think it really shook up the forwards that Vlatko selected. So if Alex Morgan, Kristen Press, and Tobin Heath opt in, I think this forward group changes completely. Actually, let me back up. I don't think it changes completely, but I think he takes fewer defenders, if that makes any sense. He'd probably take 9 defenders and 6 forwards rather than 10 defenders and 5 forwards, if you're following me here. But some of the bigger surprises, I didn't know Carly Lloyd has recovered from her injury. That was a big surprise for me. The last I heard was in the middle of the summer when Carly wasn't playing with Sky Blue. I just heard that she was injured, and I did a ton of research, and just she had never specified really, other than in interviews on different podcasts, that she was healing. I didn't know she was fully recovered, so that's excellent. Same with Mallory Pugh. Mallory Pugh has been injured to me for like ever, and I think she only played 30 minutes for Sky Blue over in 2020, which Challenge Cup and Fall Series, so that's about like 7, 8, 9 games in total. But I thought Mallory Pugh was still for sure injured, and that kind of fits the bill because it seems like she picks up a ton of injury during club play. But I'm glad to see her in the roster. I didn't have, if she was healthy, I had a feeling she would make it, but I just didn't know if she was healthy. So now here we are. Megan Rapino, this was one that I was, like I said, if some of these players are not injured and they want to play, I had no doubt that they'd be on the roster. But I just didn't know if Megan Rapino wanted to play. I picked her in my prediction for the Summer Olympic roster. I still stand by that, of course. But I think this is really telling to me that Megan Rapino still has, mentally, she still has a stake in the game. She still wants to play. She still wants to give it all for her teammates and get out there and represent the U.S. So it was really cool to see her in the roster, but I think that bodes really well and interesting to see how that forward competition is going to translate as we get closer to the Olympics. I believe I heard a few pundits this week saying that there's a possibility that maybe Lynn Williams and Megan Rapinoe are kind of battling for a spot on this Olympic roster. And with Megan Rapinoe being included in the January camp, it makes it a lot more interesting. Uh, the one thing that I was a little surprised about, and this is one of those players that's kind of on the bubble for me, Sophia Smith. Now, I talked about on the podcast last week that Sophia Smith was on my list of bubble players, if you will. I think if Alex Morgan, Kristen Press, and Tobin Heath are in this roster, I don't think Sophia's in it. Reason being is because at that point you'd have a lot of cooks in the kitchen in the forward line. You'd have a ton of players to choose from. I think with that, that's mainly the reason that Sophia Smith is in this January camp. Not saying Sophia Smith's a bad player. I think she's quite talented. First pick in the overall in the draft in 2019. But that's kind of where I stand with Sophia Smith. I think she made it as sort of a bubble player. Lynn Williams, I'm not really too surprised that she's in the January camp roster. Vlatko really likes her. I mean, Vlatko has played her a lot in camps. He's picked her pretty often. Seems to watch her play quite a bit. I think he rates her highly. And as time sort of goes on, I'm getting more and more convinced that perhaps he'll pick both Megan Rapinoe and Lynn Williams in the Summer Olympic roster. I could see, so like I said, as time goes on and you learn information, your predictions, they become a little bit more solidified, they change. But like with this particular roster, I wouldn't be surprised if the forward line, permitted they're all healthy and they want to play, would include Carly Lloyd, Mallory Pugh, Megan Rapino, Lynn Williams, Alex Morgan, Kristen Press, and Tobin Heath. Taking 7 forwards into the Olympics is a little bit bold, if you will, because then you're left with, let's see, I'm going to do some math in my head, only 9 other spots. So that's just the tough part about being the U.S. Women's National Team coach is you just have to make those tough calls. And I'm thinking that that's the 7 player pool that he's going to pick from in terms of forwards. I don't think he'll take all 7 because now that I think about it, that's you don't want over a third of your roster just being forwards because you got to have defenders to stop the ball from rolling into the goal. But Vlatko's got a lot to think about between now and the Olympics, and I think this roster and this January camp is an excellent time for him to start having those conversations. And I think the She Believes Cup will also be very telling as to the state of some of these players that he's watching a little bit more closely. I think for this camp he'll focus a little bit more on defenders, but maybe I don't want to say it was a blessing, but maybe with Tobin, Kristen, and Alex not playing it maybe helped him out a little bit because now he has more room to have different players come in so he can get a look at it. So that's just an interesting perspective and spin on things. But those are my overall reflections and thoughts on the roster. I think, like I said, Vlatko's got a lot of deciding to do. I expect him to shake things up quite a bit in the 2 friendlies against Colombia. What are your thoughts on the U.S. Women's National Team January camp roster, everybody? Comment below and let me know, of course. Okay. One little side note before we move on to our second main topic of the evening. One thing that you'll notice is that, of course, Sam Mewis made the January camp roster, and there's some interesting implications in the WSL because of that. Sam Mewis has been playing out of her mind this WSL season, and so have Tobin Heath and Kristen Press. It'll be interesting to see how Manchester City cope without Sam Mewis. Now, Manchester City, of course, is a really strong team. They've been stomping everybody in like the last few weeks. I mean, they score like 4 or 5 goals a game sometimes, and they don't even let their opponent have the ball, it seems like. But it'll be interesting to see how they cope without Sam Mewis because they don't have that aerial presence in the penalty area on corners as much. Not to say it's non-existent because obviously, like I said, Manchester is a really strong team that can cope with a lot of adversity. But when you've got a player who's as good and as strong and has a great presence in the midfield as Sam Mewis, you're obviously going to be missing that. Depending on who Manchester City plays in the coming month, it'll be interesting to see how the record goes. They've kind of got a good bye this week by getting postponed, so then they don't have to cope without Sam Mewis for the first game. But as time goes on and Sam isn't there, it'll be interesting to see how the record goes. I think they'll maybe drop a point or two while she's gone, but I don't anticipate them falling off the wagon, much like Everton have in recent weeks. So that's just a little side note I wanted to mention. It's a big boost for Manchester United that Tobin and Kristen are kind of staying over in England because they don't have to cope without those two and they can kind of keep their momentum going. Tobin and Leah Galton up top have been absolutely deadly for United. I mean, Leah Galton's up for Player of the Month, which I'll talk about in a little while. But between the two of them, they're scoring 2 goals a game, maybe even 3 between the two of them. So that's been really exciting. That's just an interesting implication on the WSL in general. But if Tobin and Kristen did end up playing in the January camp roster for the United States, it would have been interesting to see United and City and the WSL kind of cope without those particular players. So, food for thought. All right. So, with main topic out of the way, main topic number 1 down and out of the way now, let's get into the second main topic, which, as promised, we're going to talk about my picks for the FAWSL Manager of the Month and Player of the Month for December. So, we'll start off with player. Player's usually a little bit more interesting in terms of the fan base, but who I've got for Player of the Month, the nominees were Leah Galton, Sam Kerr, Jess Fishlock, Caroline Weir, and Caitlin Ford. I believe it was those 5. The player I ended up picking, it breaks my heart a little bit because I love Leah Galton. I ended up picking Sam Kerr for my pick for Player of the Month. Sam Kerr has started off this season like a rocket. I think she's really finding her form and her place in this Chelsea squad. She scored 4 goals in 2 games this month, so she did it in almost no time. She had a hat trick in that first game against West Ham. And she did it in a time when Chelsea needed to sort of start gaining ground and get a foothold and try to get into that first spot above United and also get above Arsenal in second. And she did so at a time now. They've got 2 games in hand and they're in third. Like that tells you a lot. And if they can continue that run of form, it's going to be excellent for Chelsea. Leah Galton was my close second. The only reason I didn't pick Leah Galton for Player of the Week is because United played one more game, and I'd argue also probably played weaker competition than Chelsea. Leah Galton did have 4 goals in the month of December, but like I said, they played one less game, and I believe she had 2 against Bristol City. No disrespect to any of you who are Bristol City fans, but Bristol City has been dreadful this season. I mean, I believe they're dead last. Their goal difference is, I believe, minus in the 30s at this point, so it just hasn't looked good for them. But Leah Galton still played out of her mind in the month of December. Full credit to her. I just think Sam Kerr gets the slight edge because of the hat trick and also playing 1 game fewer and at a time when her team really wanted to start climbing up the table. So good on Sam Kerr. That's my pick for the FAWSL Player of the Month for December. Now let's move on to the Manager of the Month for December. This is a bit of a bold take here, but I ended up picking Rhiann Skinner. The reason being is because at the beginning of the month, Tottenham, I believe, were second to last, only above Bristol City by a point or 2, maybe. They managed to win a couple of games convincingly, mind you, convincingly, both 3-1 wins, and climb up like 3 or 4 spots on the table. They are now in 8th, if I'm not mistaken. They were 11th before. And the best part about it is they have a game in hand, so once they make up that game in hand, that's another potential 3 points that they could get. They were in a really tough spot at that point because you don't want to be that close to being in a relegation battle. And I think that Rhiann has really done a good job at rallying the troops, getting a team together with, I think, a plan and starting to climb up the table a little bit. So I think they've gained a ton of ground, and that's really admirable. Casey Stoney and Emma Hayes for me were really, really close seconds. The only reason I didn't pick either of them was for the aforementioned reason that Skinner got Tottenham, that is, up 3 spots in the table, which I know feels a little bit like awarding, I don't want to say mediocrity, but for lack of a better term, awarding mediocrity, because Manchester United haven't lost this season, and Emma Hayes has Chelsea in third with 2 games in hand. They've both teams have been playing out of their minds. Both managers have elicited very strong masterclass tactics and have gotten their teams to perform very well. It's just neither one of them have made that drastic of a jump. I think if Casey Stoney and Emma Hayes both their squads had played like really, really tough competition, I think either one of them would have had a better case. But in Tottenham's case, you jump up that many points or that many places in the table in a month. It speaks volumes. It really does. So good on Rhiann for my Manager of the Month. It's a bit of a hot take, but let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments down below. Who are your FAWSL Manager and Player of the Month awards for December? Let me know. Don't be shy. All right. So, first 2 main topics are down and out of the way. Let's get into our third main topic of the evening. So, our third main topic is going to be related to the uptick of COVID cases that have been going on, mainly in the world of English women's football, so WSL, the championship. If you guys haven't heard this week, and I'm kicking myself because I didn't mention this in the weekend review, I apologize for that, but all quote-unquote non-elite football was suspended by the FA indefinitely because of the uptick in coronavirus cases in England. So what does that mean exactly? It basically means that, or how does it affect the WSL? It basically means that the FA Cup right now has been suspended, as well as academies, grassroots leagues, the like. But league play in the WSL and the championship are still going on. The question I posed to you guys is, how is it going to impact the WSL? I was thinking about this a lot, and I would not doubt it if the WSL ended up being suspended and postponed also in the next few weeks. I mean, you think about it, half the league has already been postponed. The Manchester City game and the Arsenal game have both been suspended for this week. I think the only reason that the other games haven't been is because a lot of players on the teams have not tested positive for COVID, at least that I know of. Who knows? As I'm recording this podcast now, more players could have been tested with COVID, or for all I know, the WSL could be suspended. But I'm starting to anticipate that the WSL might follow suit and might be suspended for a decent part of January, maybe even February, depending on how things go. That remains to be seen. I have no insider knowledge. I have no insider trades, tricks, whatever to know for sure. But I just wouldn't be surprised if the WSL in the championship didn't start suspending league games as well. Hopefully that's not the case, but then again, safety is the number one priority for players, managers, coaches, and fans too, because I believe they've been having fans at some of these games as well. So time will tell. That's just something to consider and keep your eye out for. What do you guys think? What will happen to the WSL in the championship? Jump down in the comments and let me know your thoughts. I'm going to take this moment to take a sip of this nice warm cocoa before we get into our fourth main topic of the evening. Oh boy, my cocoa has gone cold. I'll have to heat that up after the recording of the podcast. But now then, let's get into the fourth main topic of the evening. This main topic is a little bit different because we're going to kind of transition over here to the NWSL slash US Women's National Team again. I know we just spent some time talking about the FAWSL, but I'm not sure if a lot of the fandom really knows who Katarina Macario is. So I thought I'd take this main topic in the pod or on YouTube if you're watching, and expand a little bit about Katerina Makario's situation, where she comes from, what kind of player she is, who she plays for. So, Katarina Macario is a U.S. Women's National Team player who currently actually plays for Stanford University. She's a senior, and I believe she is 22 years of age, if I'm not mistaken. She is natively born in Brazil, and I believe her and her family emigrated from Brazil to America years ago. I believe she wasn't very old. She was between the ages of 10 and 18. I know that for sure. But basically, there's been this whole debacle because as she started growing up in the ranks and getting better and getting more attention, she made it clear to media that she wanted to play for the United States Women's National Team. She wanted to represent the States and not Brazil. So there are FIFA laws that come into play when you are born in a different country than the country that you want to play for or currently reside in. So Katerina Macario's case fits that bill. Born in Brazil, but has been living in the United States for a long time. So basically, what the rule states is that in order to play for the new country that you have been living in, the old rule would say that you'd have to live for 5 years in your new country after turning 18. So, with that, then, Katerina Macario wouldn't have been able to play until the age of 23, which wouldn't have been until 2022. So, a good year out at least. That's the old rule. However, with the new rules that FIFA has adopted, you're eligible to play for your new country that you're claiming if you live in that country for 5 years starting between the ages of 10 and 18. So, like I said, Katerina Macario moved to the United States between that time frame. And as long as you've been living in that new country for at least 5 years, after that fifth year you've been living there, you are eligible to play for the for that particular country. In Katerina Macario's case, the United States. So basically, the only things that are standing in her way, I believe, were citizens gaining citizenship is a step in that process. Like I said, a lot of this gets really confusing, so I apologize if I am just mucking it up for everybody. But she got citizenship in the United States back in October of 2020, so pretty recently. And now I believe they're in the final stages, and they have to submit some sort of waiver to FIFA. When I was reading the story on Sports Illustrated, they didn't specify what that favor what that favor what that waiver was and what it entailed, but apparently the United States front office is working hard to get that accomplished, and I think that they will in time for the World Cup, not the World Cup, the Olympics in Tokyo in 2021. So that's sort of the deal with Katerina Macario, whether or not she's going to be eligible. My bet is that she will gain eligibility and that she'll be in this Olympic roster for 2021. And there's one other caveat in there. There's a couple more caveats, I should say. It's important to note that she actually never represented Brazil at for international soccer, so that sort of helps her case in terms of eligibility. But I believe that within the waiver that they are submitting to FIFA, you have to prove that you didn't move to your new country explicitly for the reason of playing international soccer for them for reasons that might be clear or unclear. But like for example, this eliminates Vladko from recruiting players from all around the world and then recruiting them to the United States just to explicitly play for the national team. That gets into a lot of corruption and fair play laws that just you don't want to mess with. So that's just one of those other little clauses in this waiver that come into play. That's a consideration, if you will. But why all the hype about Katerina Macario? Where did she like what makes her so great? So let me give you a little bit of background on her playing ability. Katarina Macario is a center attacking midfielder for the Stanford Cardinals. I believe she's in her fourth year of eligibility in the NCAA. She has basically won every collegiate award possible at Stanford. Let me pull up this list and just kind of read through it a little bit. So these are her Stanford Cardinal career highlights. Strap in for this one because it's a long list. So we've got two-time NCAA champion, three-time Pac-12 champion, three College Cup appearances, member of the United States under 23s national team. That's kind of a prelude if you want to play for the national squad. You got to play for the youth. Two-time Mac Hermann Trophy winner, basically best player in women's collegiate soccer award. Think of it as like the Heisman Trophy of NCAA soccer for women's soccer. Three-time ESPNW Player of the Year, three times. You can only be in college for four, and she's won it 3 out of 4 times. That's amazing. A two-time Top Drawer Soccer Player of the Year, Honda Cup winner for women's soccer, two-time Pac-12 Forward of the Year, Pac-12 Midfielder of the Year, three-time All-American First Team, three times. And if the coronavirus pandemic wasn't going on, she probably would have been a fourth. So from her freshman year to her senior year, she's been a first-team All-American. Amazing. Three-time United Coaches All-West Region First Team, three-time College Cup All-Tournament Team, two-time Mac Hermann Trophy finalist, three-time Mac Hermann Trophy semifinalist, two-time Mac Hermann Trophy watch list, three-time Top Drawer Soccer Best 11 First Team, Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, Pac-12 All-Freshman Team, Top Drawer Soccer Freshman Best 11, COSITA Academic All-American Second Team, so she's a brainiac, she's smart. And I believe her parents are doctors, I think. I'll have to fact check myself on that later, but that's a little aside. Pac-12 Fall Academic Honor Roll, COSITA Academic All-District 8, United Coaches Academic All-American First Team, United Coaches All-Pacific Region First Team, Pac-12 All-Academic. So, wow. Just wow. Literally every award possible. She has been involved, considered, or won pretty much every award possible, and in some cases, the biggest awards multiple times. That's amazing. She's got to be doing something right. And when you take a closer look at her stats, I believe these are crazy too. For those of you who are listening on audio, I've kind of got my laptop rolled up here. I obviously can't know these off the top of my head. That's insane. But let's see here. Bear with me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. I'm a little unprepared for this particular segment. Okay. Now, okay. So Katerina Macario stats: 25 games played, all 25 of them started. I know, shocker. She has had 32 goals and 23 assists in 25 games. So let me do some math in my head here. So 55. She was involved in at least 2 goals every single game that she played in that season. That is insane. And this is looking at the 2019 stats. So just wow. Like the only other person I know of that's putting up even close to these numbers, it's a person close to my heart. It's Vivian Miedema. She's like averaging, I believe, goal involvement of 1.5 per game this season. But 2.5 goals a game, like that's astounding. The second closest was the United States' own Sophia Smith. She's in 17 games, or I'm sorry, in 21 games, Sophia Smith had 17 goals and 9 assists, which is only like half of what Katerina Macario had. So there's a lot of you can see why there's a lot of potential here and a lot of hype around this player is because she's a goal machine. And not only is she scoring, but she's facilitating with all those assists. 23 assists, so about half of her goal involvement has been assists. It's exciting for us fans too. It's unbelievable to see so much potential and see it go up the ranks. And now we get to look forward to it. So us U.S. Women's National Team fans, for those of you who are, um, for those of you who aren't, I apologize. I feel like I talk about the U.S. Women's National Team a lot on this pod, but it's just exciting. It's absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see what she does. However, I always try to maintain a little bit of caution with my optimism because at the end of the day, a lot of the stats that I'm looking at, all these awards are all at the collegiate level. None of them are at the professional level. You just never really know when you're translating from your collegiate career to your professional career. Everything changes. You go from playing, I don't want to say amateurs because they're not really amateurs. They're very elite athletes, but you go from playing the best of the best around the world, not just in the United States, but the world. So there's a bit of a learning curve there. I'm interested to see for Katarina Macario what that's going to look like. I don't know if she'll maintain those crazy stats that she had in college and professional life. If she does, wow, we could be looking at potentially one of the greatest women's United States women's players of all time. But I don't want to put any pressure on you, Katarina Macario. If you happen to be listening to this, we support you no matter what. But yeah, it's just exciting, you know? We look forward to watching you play in the near future. Okay, so with that main topic out of the way, let's see here. I want to make sure we're doing okay on time. We are still doing okay on time, which is absolutely phenomenal. So let's get into our final main topic of the evening. Main topic number 5. I had this thought earlier in the week. For those of you who don't know, this particular topic is related to Tobin Heath and Kristen Press, and honestly, other U.S. players that are around playing overseas. One thing I was thinking about was, will Tobin and Kristen still play in the WSL come next year? And I guess I could sort of extend this to Sam Mewis too. But I just wonder because, okay, so Tobin Heath posted an Instagram post, and in one of the, I guess in her soliloquy, she mentions her heart kind of being broken. I'm paraphrasing, of course, so feel free to check out her post on Instagram if you like. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but she mentioned that her heart was broken, that, she thought her future was with Portland, and then with her being traded to or being picked in the expansion draft by Racing Louisville, that thought process is gone. Like, Portland's her home. She loves Portland. Portland loves her back, and she can no longer play there. Because of that happening, it begs the question, and now with Kristen actually being picked up by Racing Louisville, will they play in the WSL past this year? Will they sign an extension with Manchester United and play an additional year this year? Or next year for 2022, I should say. Let me kind of present my argument a little bit. So, both players' rights, their playing rights, are with Racing Louisville. So, if both of them were to return after their spell with Manchester United, after their 1 year contracts are up, Racing Louisville would be the first team up to sign them. Do they want to play with Racing Louisville? That I have no idea. They could, but they haven't outrightly said yet. It seems so. Kristen Press is from Los Angeles. She was born and raised there. Angel City is coming to the NWSL in 2022. They're going to be an expansion team in 2022. And they've been playing, Kristen Press and Tobin Heath, that is, they've been playing really well with Manchester United. They're at the top of the table. They're undefeated. They've got a lot of momentum riding on them. If they continue to play really, really well, and the team has a ton of success, and they don't want to go back into the NWSL and play for Racing Louisville, who's to say that they wouldn't just sign an extension and play with Man United until Angel City break into the league in 2022? Because think about it, if their hearts are broken, they don't want to go back to the NWSL and play in Louisville. Like I said, don't know that for sure. Why wouldn't you stay in the FAWSL where you're having a ton of success? You get to play in a foreign country and you get to win a major trophy, potentially play Champions League football too if they play that well. Why would you leave that why would you leave that opportunity to go play into a city that you don't want to play for? In by playing in the NWSL, like I said, I love the NWSL obviously with all the women's football content that I put out, but when you're in the NWSL, you're playing during summers when a lot of your international play is going on. The Olympics are going to be going on in the 2021 in the middle of the 2021 season for the NWSL, so that sort of scratches any hope that they'd even have with Racing Louisville. And they can't play in the Champions League should they make it. So why not just stay in Manchester, play an additional year where you can play Champions League football, you can diversify your game a little bit. You can play against some of the toughest competition in the world. They go up against the likes of Caitlin Ford, Shalina Zadorsky, Alana Kennedy, Pernille Harder, Sam Kerr. They go up against a lot of great competition in the WSL. They get to play Champions League football. They get to be worshipped by an excellent fan base, a very large fan base, I might add. And they get to try something different. If by returning to the NWSL, or I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. And plus, by doing that, they get the WSL doesn't play during the summer when all these major tournaments are going on, ergo the Olympics. So there's no interference between club play and international play, which is nice. You get to have that separation of, for lack of a better terms, church and state, if you will. So I'll say this. I'll kind of wrap up this sort of mini discussion that I'm sort of having here. I think Tobin Heath and Kristen Press are going to continue to play in the WSL throughout their contract. I think that Manchester United is going to end up making Champions League football the way they've been playing this season. They haven't lost yet. I'll knock on wood just in case. I don't want to jinx it for all of us Manchester United fans. And I think what they'll do is things will be going so well for them in Manchester. They're going to sign another 1 year deal or an extension or a player option if it's in their contract. That I don't know. And they'll play in Manchester for 2022. Between the 2021 and 2022 seasons of Manchester, they'll crush it in the Olympics, they'll have a ton of fun, they'll play against the world's best. Then they get to return and look forward to playing Champions League football in 2022. And then when that's all said and done, they've had 2 years to play over in England, try something new, diversify their game, play against great competition. Then when Angel City is having their expansion draft, I believe either they will buy or trade for the playing rights to Kristen Press and or Tobin Heath, and that will eventually lure them back into the United States to play in the NWSL. Overall, that's what I think is going to happen. They're going to go play in Manchester for the rest of this year, obviously, because they're under contract. They're going to play so well that United's going to play so well, I should say. I should be a little bit more specific. United's going to play so well that they're either going to win the league or make Champions League football. They're going to sign an extension. They're going to go to the Olympics. They're going to play with the United States. They're going to play 2022, play Champions League football. They're going to get all that awesome stuff out of their system. Then Angel City is going to pick up their rights somehow, some way, whether it's by buying or for trading or just picking them up in the expansion draft. And then they will eventually return to the NWSL in 2022/2023. So that's my bold long-term prediction for those two players. I'm curious to see what your guys' thoughts are on my theory. That's a pretty bold and large theory, especially since obviously I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know the future, but jump down in the comments and let me know. What do you think Kristen Press and Tobin Heath will do for the next few years, really? What's the long-term plan? Before I wrap up the podcast for the evening, I will put in a caveat to my theory. If for whatever reason, or if Manchester United don't end up making Champions League football, I think the likelihood of my plan is going to diminish a little bit. I think they'll be less likely to sign some sort of contract or extension for 2022, but we'll see. So, all right, guys. So, that about does it for this podcast. Now, before I go for the evening, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you to all of you who have stuck with me for this hour and have listened and have had a good time. I would love to hear from all of you. Feel free to jump in down in the comments, get involved in the fandom. Of course, be civil. Don't be too hard on each other. But I'd like to hear from you guys. If you guys have any questions or thoughts, or just want to discuss any particular things on this podcast, feel free to drop a question down into the comments of this video, or if you want to send them to me via DM on TikTok, Instagram, or any of the social media platforms that I mentioned earlier on, feel free to. And what I'll do is maybe if I get enough questions, I'll even do whole podcast episodes dedicated to just answering your questions, provided that they're appropriate, of course. I'd love to hear from you guys, fan theories, anything. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the next pod. If you like what you hear, feel free to tell your friends about it. Feel free to subscribe, like, comment, whatever you do to support your podcasts. Or if you don't like what you're hearing and you want to give the thumbs down, feel free, go nuts. I don't mind at all. Or if you don't like what you're hearing, feel free to tell me too. So that'll do it for the second episode of the women's soccer slash football podcast. My name is Bryce, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care. We'll see you in the next video.